Welcome to the Narcissist Slayers podcast. We are your co-hosts, Hope Jay
and Lynn Catalano.
Tune in every month as we teach you how to slay the emotional vampire in your life.
Hope Jay is an attorney and founder of the Center for Hope Western New York, a nonprofit organization providing low and no-cost resources to victims of narcissistic abuse. Visit our website at centerforhopewny.org for more information.
And Lynn Catalano is an attorney and a narcissistic abuse recovery coach. She's the author of Wrecking Ball Relationships. Find out more about Lynn at lynncatalano.com. We are both survivors of narcissistic abuse, and we bring our personal experiences and professional expertise to help you on your path to healing.
Please support us by hitting that subscribe button. We are on YouTube and Spotify at the Narcissist Slayers Podcast.
And follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at the Narcissist Slayers Podcast. Send us your questions to narcslayers@centerforhopewny.org.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. Together, we will help you slay the narcissist in your life and reclaim your power.
Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that we have never explored before, but yet I think it's a really important topic.
And we get asked about it regularly.
And that is the 5 mistakes you should avoid when leaving a narcissist.
So I feel like, Hope, you probably get asked this even more than I do, and you counsel people on this regularly.
Yes, because generally when people come into my office, it's their end goal is to leave the relationship. So
Right.
I tend to see people struggle with this topic in real time.
Well, leaving any relationship has its challenges and difficulties, but leaving a relationship with someone who suffers from narcissistic personality disorder presents a whole different level of challenges. Do you agree with that?
Oh my God, yes. Yes.
So we're going to explore 5 mistakes you should avoid specifically today.
Yes.
Let's just dive in.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So number 1, you should avoid engaging in emotional arguments.
So this is something that I think people struggle with so much, Lynn, because for a bunch of reasons. But first, the number one, to me, this is the number one mistake that people make when trying to get out of this relationship. Okay.
Okay.
Because when you have been in a relationship like this, there are sort of, well-worn pathways of how you interact with this person. And you're kind of, it's like the dance that you do, right?
Right.
And they say or do something that triggers your emotional reaction and
Right.
you react in a certain way. And that's the engagement piece of it that starts the whole cycle, right? So, I mean, we're going to talk more about this. I know there's other topics or other mistakes that we're going to, address. But when you continue to relate to this person or engage with this person at an emotional level, that is in my opinion, the single greatest mistake that people make. And there's a number of reasons for that. But first and foremost, you have to remember what sustains a narcissist. And that is narcissistic supply.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So if you break it down that way and you think about it that way, and I tell people this all the time, and I'm sure you do as well, what do narcissists want from you? They everything that they're doing is to provoke an emotional reaction from you.
Yes.
And they don't care, and this is the part I think sometimes people don't get. They don't care if it's positive
Or negative. Yep.
Right? So as long as they can still, trigger you and pull your strings, and that to them it shows them that they still have power and control over
And
you.
it all goes back to power and control.
Right?
Every time.
Right?
Every time.
So whether you're
Yeah.
praising them or you're, I tell people, this is what I always tell people, you're on a fetal position in the floor crying,
Right.
Doesn't matter, because what it does is it just reinforces their centrality in
Yep.
your life.
Yep. And validates them.
Yep. And you're off to the races. So learning how to disengage at an emotional level is huge.
So when I'm coaching someone and they're at the end of the relationship, but they still have to deal with this person, I often tell them, do not take their bait.
Oh, yes, exactly.
They know exactly how to push your buttons. They know exactly what to say. to provoke you.
Yep.
And I tell them those exact words. Hope everything they do is to provoke a reaction out of you.
Yep.
Don't give it to them.
Yep.
Don't give it to them.
Don't.
It's disarmament.
Yep.
That's disarmament.
Yep. And it's also, again, I know we talk about this a lot, but it's also a way to take back your power.
Yes. 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 Yes.
Right?
I love that.
Because,
Yes.
you know, when you engage in these, you know, well-worn sort of interactions and dynamics with this person,
Yes.
you're just, it's like almost like a reflex. Like, you know, like when you go to the doctor and they hit you on the knee and you're, hey, I just did it. And your knee goes like this. And it's like
called a knee-jerk reaction.
Knee-jerk reaction, right?
Yes.
It's because you feel like you don't have any control because you've been, you know, stuck in this dynamic with this person for so long that when they do this, you do that and you don't even think about it.
Well, so what should you do? And this is part of what I coach people is you have to be more mindful of. You have to recognize what's happening in your body.
Yeah.
Now, I know
That's,
when someone pushes my buttons, as my narcissist did, certain things would happen, certain visceral responses, and I know you can relate to this. So my heart rate would speed up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My body temperature would rise. I could feel the heat coming into my face, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you stop those things? And I give you lots of strategies to do that because I think it's so important to shut it down.
Mm-hmm.
And then be aware of what happens. Like think 10 steps ahead. What happens if I do react the same way I've reacted every other time?
Mm-hmm.
You can play it out. Narcissists are incredibly consistent.
That is true.
So you know what's going to happen. So just don't take the bait.
Perfect.
All right.
Yep.
Number 2, what's another mistake that you make that you should avoid making when you're leaving a narcissist? Don't expect closure or accountability.
Yeah. And you know what, though? I mean, yes, it's easy for us to say.
Very.
We can say that.
Very. From this perspective,
But
yes.
when you are, you know, you're in that space with them and they've harmed you and they've wronged you and they've broken your heart and shattered your world into a million pieces, and you're trying to figure out how to put all those pieces back together again. Everyone, I think it's a natural human impulse to want like someone to be accountable for how much they've hurt you.
Of course.
And, you know, and a lot of times in relationships with people that aren't narcissists, you know, you may be able to get to that place. Usually not right away because feelings are hurt and, you know, generally people need to go in their corners and think about it and whatever. But if you're not a narcissist, at some point you're going to come back together and say, hey, you know, I, you know, spoke in a way that was I realized that was harmful to you.
Right.
I behaved in a way that I clearly hurt your feelings. I'm sorry. You know, I don't want to do that again. You know, I want you to know that, and that's the, like we've talked about, like the real apology, right? And
I waited so long. I waited so long. And then I saw this, someone said this to me, that waiting for closure from someone who suffers from NPD is like waiting for the dead to bury themselves. That's rough. That's dark. I know it's dark. But if you're in this moment, you do understand how dark it is. And you just can't. You can't do that. You cannot expect them to all of a sudden change and take responsibility for their actions.
They're never going to.
No.
By the way, any apology that you might get, because I think a lot of times people stay stuck in this step because you get the false apology, the faux apology,
please don't leave me.
Exactly, because they're trying to pull you back into the cycle. So you're so desperate for something that you'll take anything. And, you know, I think that it's a very self-destructive thing to do because you do have some power to break the cycle. And that's kind of what we're talking about here is, you know, when we talk about mistakes in leaving a narcissist, really what we're talking about is how not to get pulled back into that cycle.
Yeah.
And if you engage in these types of behaviors, or, you know, you still want something from them, then you're much more vulnerable to getting pulled back in.
Agreed.
And wanting closure is a huge thing, because I know, and I'm guilty right here, guilty. I wrote the letters. I wrote
letters.
You wrote letters. We both wrote letters. I
don't even think he read them.
I think it was like
Yeah.
the last one
Yeah.
I wrote when I finally exited the relationship. I want to say it was like a 14 or 15 page.
Me too.
Okay. So we've both been there pouring out our
Yes.
hearts,
Yes.
saying the ways that you've hurt me,
Yes.
asking for some sort of accountability.
Yes.
And it's crickets. You get nothing because
Yes.
they don't care.
Well, it's not just that. We know that they are unable to process blame.
Sure.
They cannot,
Right.
and they can't process shame. And so in order
Yes.
to avoid all those things, they're going to shift the blame.
Correct.
They're going to throw it out at somebody.
Yes.
It was you,
Yeah.
turn the tables.
Yeah.
We've been there.
Yes.
So we know that that's what they do. And it's easy for me to say now that I'm not in the thick of it.
That's right. It's much easier.
Yes.
But when you're in the thick of it, it's so hard.
It is so hard.
It's so hard.
Yes. So please, but save yourself the time and energy. Don't write the 14-page letter like we did.
Yeah.
Just don't.
Yeah. I mean, if you need to write it just for a catharsis, because I write for that reason,
right.
But don't give it to them expecting some sort of a miracle or empathy or compassion.
Please.
You're not going to get it.
No. All right. Number 3, this is a big one. These are the mistakes to avoid when you're leaving a narcissist. So number 3 is not having a safety plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this is big because, when Hope and I speak to our clients, this is probably one of our biggest concerns is what's your safety level and where are you in this relationship?
I do, informal and sometimes formal risk assessments with people.
Wow.
Depending on the history. Now, I think we all understand that narcissistic abuse tends to be insidious emotional and psychological abuse, but sometimes it does escalate to physical violence.
Yeah.
And, I always tell people that if there's physical violence in your relationship, it didn't just happen overnight.
Right.
You've been in a relationship that has been characterized by what I call coercive control.
Yeah.
Which is really sort of another name for narcissistic abuse. It's all the ways that your abuser tries to control you before they raise a hand or a fist.
Yeah.
So I need to determine how safe you are before you leave. And as an attorney who works predominantly with women who are leaving abusers, this is huge. This is a huge part of my practice. Yeah. And I also was a former assistant district attorney and working in the domestic violence and sexual assault bureau. So this was something that I had to constantly be concerned about because women are at the greatest risk when leaving their abuser because their abuser feels like they're losing control. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
What would you say to our listeners if they're at this point and they have not develop their own safety plan? What tips would you give them to put that together? Are there resources out there?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you've been in a relation, even, I have to say, because I never want to minimize or downplay when someone has been in a relationship that has been characterized by coercive control and there hasn't been physical domestic violence, that person is somehow safer. Yeah. A lot of times, when you do a formal risk assessment, if there hasn't been any violence towards you in the past or violence toward animals or, things that sort of, that are those higher level risk factors, I think sometimes people tend to ignore that power and control dynamic that can explode at any time. And just because someone hasn't been physically violent before doesn't mean that they won't be when they are in danger of losing their soul narcissistic supply. Right?
In tandem,
right?
yes.
Yeah, because it's a huge threat.
Yeah.
It's a huge threat.
Yeah.
So when I can't say how to do this exactly because I've been doing this for so long. Yeah. So I kind of, there are definitely scenarios that give me pause. And I don't want to do it alone. So I always pull in another professional, someone who works in the domestic violence field. I want it to be a counselor or an advocate or somebody who I feel can work with my client and help my client to develop an actual safety plan. And those plans include things like having a bag set aside so that you
Yes.
have
A go
clothing
bag.
and money,
Yes.
and you've all spoken maybe to a friend, or you have, you know that you can go to a shelter or somewhere
Yeah.
where this person cannot find you. Oftentimes that we will not serve people with divorce papers in these kinds of scenarios when the person is home. So I make sure that they're going to be away for the weekend, or that they're not going to be in the house, because we want to prevent any blow ups or things of that nature when someone is served with papers. There's lots of details that you have to pay attention to when you're working with women who are coming out of these kinds of relationships.
Yeah. We're also going to put the hotline for the domestic violence hotline right on the screen, so that if you're ever in doubt, please call that number
Yes,
for sure.
of course.
Yes. Okay, number 4. This is interesting because I actually find this to be a very telling statement about narcissists. But the mistake you should avoid making is telling them too much in advance.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I got to tell you,
You
I
know,
got to a point with my narcissist. I'm sorry,
no, go ahead.
not regarding leaving, but where I just stopped sharing information. And I think that's a very interesting place to be. And it tells you a lot about the state of your relationship. But this is more about, you don't want to share what your future plans are.
Yeah. And again, I think it applies no matter what, but particularly if you're gearing up for a legal battle. I mean, that I think goes without saying, but sometimes I don't think people think about it,
Yeah.
as far as like, you don't want to tip your hand. And again, sometimes, and maybe oftentimes, it's for the safety reasons that we
Right.
just talked about,
Right.
right?
Right.
So you don't want to tip your hand because you could be at risk for physical violence, or more likely, what's going to happen is they're going to engage you in some sort of a, beat down, an emotional or psychological beat down, to convince you to stay. And when you have finally worked up the courage and have made that decision to leave, the last thing in the world that you need is to go another round with the narcissist.
Yeah. Not only that is
Yeah.
that is very important, but the idea that they are always collecting information and they are always looking for your weakness.
Absolutely.
And so I remember my narcissist liked to take that kind of information and he would just go, oh, okay. And then later on, he would figure out a way to use
Use it
that
against
against me.
you.
Yes.
And it's also important in legal battles,
Yeah.
because I think a lot of times what happens at the end of relationships is people's emotions are raw, and people say and do things that they wouldn't normally do.
Yeah.
And if you
Yeah.
are broken, emotionally, which many, many people are at the end of a relationship like this, and you're just trying to get out and keep yourself intact somehow and protect your kids and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Anything that you say can and will be used against you
Absolutely.
in a court of law.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
you want to keep all of that to a minimum, and don't open the door
Yeah.
for any of that.
Yeah. And I also feel like, in this is number 4, I feel like go back to number 1. Do not
Yes.
take their bait.
Yes.
Do not engage. Just don't engage. It's just better that way. And I know how difficult it is, because remember, this is a cycle. It goes
Yes.
around and around, the narcissistic abuse cycle. And so when the narcissist feels like they're losing power and control of you, they're going to cycle around back to that love bombing.
That's correct.
And they're going to do what they,
Yep.
please don't leave me. Now,
Yeah.
there's also the reverse of that, which they use a lot, which is, you're nothing without me.
Yes.
So you have to be prepared for this roller coaster of emotions and of cruelty. And you have to just breathe and take a step back.
It depends what channel they're on, right? Remember, we've
Right.
talked about the 3 channels of
Yes. I
narcissistic
love that.
people, and it's the charm, which is
Yes.
the love bombing part,
Yes.
the self-pity, which is the please don't leave me,
Yes.
and then the one that is the most fearful one, or the one that I think is that we need to be most fearful of is the rage.
Yes.
So if
Yes.
they're cycling through
Yes.
charm, self-pity, and rage.
Yes.
And if you think about it, if anyone who's listening to this really thinks about it for any amount of time, you're going to realize that's all they've got.
That is all they've got.
That's their full emotional range.
Yeah.
It's charm,
Yep.
self-pity, and rage.
Yeah. I mean, Hope knows this already. I could
Yeah.
talk for days about my narcissistic father and all the different ways he exhibited these behaviors. But to say that she's completely 100% right about their channels would be an understatement. I once asked him, like, why can't you make conversation with your grandchildren? And he was like, you expect me to talk to them? Like, he literally said to me, this was a man who did a cable access talk show with tens of viewers. Tens. I said 10. 10 viewers. But he couldn't talk to his grandchildren. Why? Why waste charm on them? Why waste it? He had no reason to talk to them. Horrible. Horrible. Yeah. Unbelievable. Anyway, enough about me. Let's go on. Let's go. Our fifth mistake for you to avoid when leaving a narcissist is going no contact without support.
Oh, God. Yes. I feel like we should give this one some real attention because this is where people trip up the most. Okay. I think the first topic that we talked about, which was engaging in emotional arguments, it kind of goes hand in hand with not really understanding how important it is to go no contact and thinking that if you break no contact, it's no big deal. It's kind of like the alcoholic that tells themselves, I can just have one drink.
Yeah.
Or the person who's quitting smoking and says, I'm just going to have this one cigarette.
Yeah.
And then it's the same thing with a narcissist when you go no contact. There's no room for any contact. I don't know how else to say it, because if you look at your relationship with a narcissistic abuser through the lens of you being in sort of you being the addict, okay?
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to imply that you are an addict, but I think it's helpful to use this analogy.
I do too.
Okay. So one interaction with this person is a slippery slope because they understand all of your triggers. They know how to manipulate you. They've been doing it most of the times for years. You're vulnerable. You're not emotionally stable yet. You haven't built up your self-worth and your self-esteem. That takes a long time after this relationship to do.
Yeah.
So if you're still in that space where you're vulnerable and you're just starting to go no contact and you break it, you're going right back where you were.
Yeah.
So that is so important.
Yeah.
I don't know how to stress it enough.
I hope I just did this. I just did a video about this because I think it's so important. So I talked to someone the other day, a prospective client, and they were crying and they told me how difficult it was leaving this person, as it always is. And then they said, but it's their birthday in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And this person had texted them. And I said, oh, you have to block them on your phone too. You can't just block them on social media. You have to block them on your phone.
Oh, you have to block them on everything. Now, there's an actual term for what you're talking about, and it's called narc dipping. I don't know. I don't know how many people are familiar with that term.
Wow.
But it's like once you go no contact, and then you like start making excuses to yourself. Well, I'm just going to check their social media. I want to see what they're doing, or I'm going to unblock them for a minute to see if they left a message, or I'm going to create this space where they can get to me. Sometimes you may have just truly innocently forgotten to block them on a certain space like LinkedIn or something. Okay. And then they try to contact you there and you're like, shit. Okay. And then you fix that. Or there's a part of you that, addict part of you that isn't ready or willing or able to cut that last thread because you're still somehow psychologically
I would say tune into our last episode about why empaths are
Yeah.
so drawn and
Yes.
attracted
Yes.
to narcissists, because this is why we are people pleasers and we love them.
Yeah.
We love them
Yeah.
at their best. We love them.
Yeah.
And all we've been doing through that narcissistic abuse cycle, through our trauma bonds, is hoping
Yes.
that we could get back to that person that we fell in love with.
Right.
And so I think, watch that other episode, because we really did a deep dive on why that attraction exists. But I want to address a different issue in this one, besides going no contact, which I think is so important. The other part is your support network. Now, we've talked about this a lot. Narcissistic abuse is very isolating intentionally. The narcissist wants to isolate you from your friends and family and your support network because they don't want to shine a light on their bad behavior. And so, if you've let those people, like, you haven't spoken to them in a long time, and you might be thinking, who's there for me? Because I've been isolated from these people. Well, I'm going to tell you, I believe, in my humble opinion, they're still there for you. Just reach out to them, because they still love you no matter what.
Right. And it is very, very difficult to go no contact without like a support buddy. Like when you, I mean, I'm not going to apologize again, but I'm going to use the same analogy. Like, so if you're going to Al-Anon or some other group like that, you're going to have a sponsor, someone who, when you feel like you're about to do the thing that is self-destructive, that you can contact that person, and that person can help hold you accountable.
Yeah.
So if the narcissist has somehow managed to connect with you because you didn't block them all the way, or maybe they made it around the block, or maybe they used a third party to get to you and they're so sorry and all the things, and the part of you that isn't fully healed is hearing, unfortunately still susceptible to that. If you feel in a way that you want to reconnect with them, then use that person or people in your life. Say, hey, you know what? I'm feeling weak right now. It's okay.
Yeah.
Believe me, I can't tell you how many times I felt like that. And I had to sit on my freaking hands.
Yeah.
Okay. Once you get through that part of it and you have gone, it's going no contact is like being in detox.
Yeah.
And once you are detoxed from this person and enough time and space has passed, those urges to be in touch with that person are going to fade.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a great reason to look into the support group at the Center for Hope.
Yes, absolutely.
And know that you are not alone, and that there are, unfortunately, there are lots of people out there that have suffered similarly, and they're coming to the Center for Hope for that kind of support.
That's
so,
right.
Please, I tell this to everyone. Talk to someone.
Yes.
Don't keep it inside. Talk to someone. So whether that's finding a support group, whether that's seeking out a therapist who has some understanding of narcissistic abuse, or that's talking to a coach like me, find someone that understands what you're going through and can help you.
And you don't have to go through this alone. That's why we created the Center for Hope. And that's why we're doing this podcast. And we want to make sure that you don't feel alone out there, that you know that there are people who understand and who are available to help you go through this process and to get to the other side.
Yes. What a great place to end.
Yes, I think so.
Yes.
Thank you so much for listening. And we'll see you next time on the Narcissist Layers.
Bye-bye.